very interesting news, actually, more about like the industry, the TV industry, that happened in the past week and a half. I've lost all semblance of time. I will say that with all this traveling and whatnot.
I think it was,
I think it was a week and a half ago.
I think it was about a week and a half
ago. Yeah. But we got back-to-back news one day and then the next. First HBO saying, giving an announcement that they were going to do a standalone streaming service.
Yes.
Well, I'll backtrack to that in a second. And then the very next day, CBS saying they're doing the same thing.
Right.
So we went from none of the major players in like network and cable to two of the biggest. I mean, actually, the biggest I'd say in cable, I guess AMC's given them some run for money, but I still say HBO when you look at their overall library. And then CBS, in terms of viewership, the biggest network saying we're going to do it.
And with CBS, and we can talk about this too, it gets very complicated, but with CBS on board, likely Showtime and CW to follow.
And David Nevins, David Nevins is the president of Showtime. I can't remember who said what. Les, another good first name buddy. The head of all of CBS, I think he did imply, or maybe it was Nevins, but someone up top did imply Showtime is probably coming soon once they made that CBS announcement.
Wait, Les Moonves?
It was Les Moonves.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if it was him or Nevins at Showtime.
Okay.
But one of them.
Somebody said something.
Yeah, did say, yes, Showtime is probably following now that we made this. Yeah.
Especially with HBO. So here's my theory based on nothing, but it's really just my theory. Is that, and this is a side note, is that HBO Go, how it was unlimited, like you basically, if you had it, you could give it to like 10 of your friends and they could be using it while you were using it. And it didn't matter. Like they were never going to call you out. It was totally fine. I've been using my friends.
And they've been asked directly about this, it's like,
it's like they're tracking.
Yeah, of course they know it's happening and they're like, no, it's fine.
And but it's fine because they're doing, basically you're doing focus group work for them to be like, well, how many people of this group that's doing it right now for free would pay once we lock this down? And it's probably that they're like, we'll probably lose 25% of people, but if we make it a reasonable price, all of these other people will pay. And they're right.
Yeah.
Here's my concern. I think that CBS said that they're going to charge $5. I
think it's $6. I think it's $5.99.
$5.99. Yeah, like this, like total, like internet. What were the things that they used to sell online at like $9.99?
There's a lot of things, although you're unknowingly you're referencing the fact that the WWE network, who some would say have helped this along, are $9.99 and mention it all the time.
Yeah,
it's like a big promotional thing for them. $9.99 a month.
So here's my concern, because this is a lot to unpack, because there's a lot of complicated elements that go along with streaming, starting with the fact that CBS can have some of their old shows, but not all of them, because they don't own all of them.
And they can have shows that weren't on CBS, including Twin Peaks and Cheers,
which they do own,
because they own as part of the CBS Paramount Viacom family.
Right. So this is where it gets a little more complicated. Like HBO, it's a little simpler for them,
because they own just about everything they've aired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
CBS, any other network, it starts to get really, really complicated about who owns what. Like CW, Warner Brothers is going to own a lot of that.
Yep.
So here's where it gets tricky. You're starting to see this, I guess you could call it a la carte method, where you'd be like, oh, I'm going to sign up for this network and this network. And ideally, it's to save you money, right? And a headache, and because you watch your stuff online anyway.
Right.
But it's going to, if every single network does that, and it's $6 for every single network.
Or more.
Plus Netflix, plus there's going to be certain other things, it's going to start to really add up. And it's going to be as expensive as cable.
Right. At a certain point, it will still be the $150 you're paying for. I get, and that is definitely true, and it's like, everyone's bringing it up, and it's very valid. I guess it will come down to, though, for some people, that there just are people who will have an easier time just cutting out entirely, or like cutting out a network entirely, being like, well, I just don't care enough. Like there's no shows on the network, or one that I was kind of watching, but it wasn't like an appointment viewing, so I'm okay without that one.
Yeah.
And that one, hopefully Netflix will still have. That's
where it's going to get even more complicated. Questions get complicated.
Is down the line, will these networks still want their shows on Netflix too? if they're also providing them on their streaming service.
Their streaming service becomes that much less valuable if they do not have access to every season of the show.
Right.
Because I don't want to go to one place to marathon it and then here to catch up and then there to, you know what I mean? It's just really too much. I feel like, but they can't do that. This is why I believe that it should not be the networks launching streaming platforms, but the studios.
And again, like you mentioned Warner Brothers, and we've mentioned often, Warner Brothers is such an interesting studio because they produce so much IGN-friendly shows, genre shows.
Yeah.
If they launched the Warner Brothers streaming service, it would be interesting because identification-wise, it's not as easy for people to even understand as a network, you know? Because it's like, wait, Warner Brothers TV launched a streaming service. Is that like just old shows that aired on the WB, like Buffy? No, that's owned by 20th Century Fox. Well, what's on it? Chuck. That was an NBC show. No, but it was a Warner Brothers produced show, and Fringe.
And you want to hear something, and I have to vet this piece of information, so take this with a grain of salt. A friend of mine was telling me the other day that Warner Brothers owns like 85% of content. I'm not talking about TV content necessarily, but I'm talking about libraries of older films and not just classic films either, but like really. So if they were to launch a streaming service that had not only all of their television shows, but all of their films as well,
and all old MGM stuff.
Yes, all of the Turner, all of the old MGM. Warner Brothers would dominate this field, and it's crazy to me that they haven't done it yet. Because if you even think, and then let's bring it back to our world, okay? You think about all of these various DC shows that are happening right now. How much easier would it be to just have them under one umbrella that could truly integrate, cross-promote, they could have crossover without all these negotiations and all these other problems?
Yeah. And it's, again, I mean, it is that thing of them being willing to risk and then eventually maybe completely get rid of the network system, which is a very hard thing to do because so much is entrenched in it. You know?
It is, but it's less and less so. And if the studios can get ahead of this, well, they're not ahead of the curve, but just about parallel with the curve, where the networks are launching their own individual sort of online streaming services. If they were like, okay, well, we're going to do the same thing, the networks can't win. Eventually, they'll still be players for a period of time, but eventually the networks can't win because it's actually the studios that own the rights.
Right, but keep in mind, of course, that every network has a studio side, and so it's again making like, you know, could NBC Universal ever get to that point of saying like, NBC, the network you knew and loved for decades and decades, is gone. However, here's the NBC Universal streaming site that has decades of TV shows, old and new.
That has all of the Fast and the Furious movies, that has
The Office,
that has all of these other things that you loved. Yes, maybe it's initially confusing for viewers, but there's people like us to explain it and make
That's why you should listen to channel surfing.
You know, but I'm serious. Like, to me, that is the absolute answer, because then at that point you have how many that you'll have to be paying for each month. You know, it's a much more reasonable number. Hulu collapses, Netflix collapses. That part,
dogs and cats living together.
Chaos. Total chaos. I forgot the rest of the line. Mayhem.
Right.
But in any event, I actually think that is what I personally really would, and it's not like I don't like Netflix or Hulu or that side of Amazon, but it's getting too disconnected at this point. And this is, to me, the way to make it all make sense and work.
Yeah, I mean, it really will. I mean, now that this has happened, because look, I mean, HBO has been asked this for years, and then certainly once they launched HBO Go, you know, it was nonstop. It's incessant, not just in our comments, but every website. It's like, hey, why won't they do it standalone? I don't have cable. I don't want cable. But I would pay for a standalone HBO.
Right.
And now they're doing it, which is amazing. And then the fact that, the very next day, CBS, huge network. And again, it was funny on the outside because CBS, the perception is the older network, and it's, you know, the more people watching it that don't use DVRs and all that stuff. And yet they were the trendsetter here for all the other major networks to do this. Which to their credit, you know. But it will be interesting now to see, you know, how soon are we going to start seeing a lot more of this?
How would you that I've just said how I would like to see it play out, which also leaves room, by the way, for an HBO to have their own and so because they are a different animal.
Right.
In that way, I think that something like Showtime has a little more trouble probably in the long run than something like HBO does.
Yeah.
How would you like to see it all play out?
Because like what if Showtime and some of the CW shows, the one that CBS already own, which is not a lot, honestly. But yeah, what if they were all part of the same CBS streaming?
I think that's how it should go.
You know? Yeah. And so it's like Penny Dreadful and Rain, which is a CBS produced show, and a lot of CBS, like a lot of those procedurals that are CBS owned, and Cheers and Twin Peaks, they're all available. I mean, that to me makes a lot of sense.
And you mean the ones that are owned as CBS as a studio?
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's probably. We're stating it here. We have the answer. The answer is studios get moving. I mean, Warner Brothers can afford to take the risk. By the way, if anybody can, they can.
Yeah.
Take the risk. See, you have the most content, seemingly.
Yeah.
Take the risk and see if it works. I think it will, and I think it's the best answer for us, the consumer, ultimately.
Yeah, we'll see. You know, it does remind me, by the way, that Warner Brothers, about 4 years ago, maybe a little more, they launched the WB.com. They used that name that no one had been using. And WB.com was funny because it was a mixture of shows that were WB shows, like Gilmore Girls, but there were also shows like Veronica Mars and the Ben Stiller Show and just Warner Brothers' own shows on there. And it's gone away now. I think if you go to the WB.com, it just reverts you to Warner Brothers' website. Yeah. But I don't know, maybe that was even like almost a test run for this sort of thing.
I just think it becomes very interesting when you not only have full seasons of television shows, but all of those movies too available in one platform.
Yeah. Yeah. So
in any event, we'll see what happens.
We will see what happens.
It's still evolving.
Yeah, it's certainly a question that we are wondering much about.